Welcome back to Sip and Talk. Today, we're circling back to something we touched on before, the whole situation with Taiwan and, the potential global ripple effects if things were to change drastically under Chinese administration.
Absolutely. Last time we talked about some of the more overt dangers. Today, it's more about the battle for minds, you could say. We're tackling that really persistent narrative, the one we call the UN Holy Grail theory.
Right. It sounds almost mythical, doesn't it? But the story they're selling is, well, it's got some major plot hole. The basic idea, the one you hear repeated, is super polished. Unify with the PRC, and boom, Taiwan gets instant UN recognition. All its isolation problems just vanish.
Yeah, it's like propaganda whack-a-mole. You knock down one argument, another pops up. And this UN thing, it sounds so logical on the surface, right? International status, belonging, but it's built on shaky ground.
Right.
The UN isn't this all-powerful entity, especially when it comes to major powers doing what they want.
Exactly. It's like they're offering you this amazing dessert, this slice of international acknowledgement cake. But they conveniently forget to mention the calories, the risks, like losing your ability to make your own decisions, having to follow rules you don't agree with, or, potentially getting criticized on the world stage. That part's always missing from the menu.
It's pure cognitive warfare, really. Yeah. They package this fake cause and effect thing, unify, get UN status, to make it seem like the only logical choice. The underlying message is always, staying separate means you're isolated, weak, no future.
And we're going to break that down piece by piece today. Look at what the UN actually can and can't do, and how this whole narrative messes with perceptions both in Taiwan and internationally.
But, speaking of things not quite matching up, or maybe cultural friction, we should mention our friend Mickey's recent trip.
Oh, yeah, Mickey in Seoul. He had this slightly awkward experience, right?
Yeah, he was in a restaurant, and some tourists, apparently from mainland China, were like hovering, rushing to grab seats before the people sitting there had even gotten up properly.
Oh, yeah, he found that really, really rude. Like, zero personal space awareness.
And that little incident, it kind of touches on a theme, doesn't it? Ignoring boundaries. It wasn't necessarily about where the people were from, but the behavior itself.
Right. It's like cutting in line, ignoring someone else's time. Or this seat-snatching thing, ignoring personal space. It feels aggressive.
There's often a socio-cultural context, Sometimes it stems from this high competition, low trust environment. Think about massive cities where resources, whether it's subway seats or hospital appointments, feel scarce. People develop this reflex, almost a survival tactic. Grab it first, secure it now.
And when that behavior gets transplanted into a place with, let's say, different social norms like South Korea or Taiwan or Japan, it really jars. It feels offensive.
The key is separating the behavior from the individual, or generalizing about a whole group. This kind of thing can happen anywhere, but maybe the scale is different in environments with huge populations and intense competition. And of course, online videos tend to amplify the negative stuff.
So it's about understanding the why behind it, the social environment, the competition, not just jumping to prejudice. And that idea of pushing boundaries, whether it's for a restaurant seat or something much bigger.
Like a UN seat, exactly. It's about understanding that drive to secure something, sometimes at the expense of established norms or respect for others' space or sovereignty. So keeping that idea of boundary pushing in mind, let's talk about the biggest symbolic boundary marker. The United Nations.
Okay, let's nail down this propaganda thesis we're looking at. The core claim is basically, Taiwan's locked out of the UN, unify with China, problem solved, you get instant international status.
Simple, right?
Deceptively simple. It plays right into that very human need for recognition, for legitimacy. But to see why it's a false promise, we got to look at the history, specifically that big one. UN General Assembly Resolution 2758 from 1971.
Ah, yes, Resolution 2758. Often brought up, but usually misunderstood or, let's be honest, deliberately twisted. What did it actually decide? Okay, this is crucial. It decided who represents China at the UN. It recognized the People's Republic of China, the PRC, as the only legitimate representative of China and kicked out the delegation from the Republic of China, the ROC.
Right.
However, and this is the part they conveniently leave out, the resolution text itself did not settle the final political status of Taiwan. It didn't say Taiwan is a province of the PRC.
So the PRC got the China seat, but the resolution itself didn't legally define Taiwan's relationship to the PRC. They sort of sidestepped the trickier sovereignty question.
Exactly. Settling the representation question was easier politically at the time. Defining Taiwan's status would have been a much bigger fight. So the PRC got the seat, and now they used the power of that seat to block Taiwan from participating in anything UN-related.
And then they twist the meaning of the resolution after the fact.
Precisely. Beijing interprets it as the world recognizing Taiwan as part of its territory, but that's just not what the resolution text actually says. It's a post hoc justification.
Okay, so if that's the reality of 2758, the propaganda promise that unification lets Taiwan join the UN just falls apart immediately.
Completely. Taiwan wouldn't join anything. The ROC, as a political entity, would cease to exist on the international stage. It would be absorbed entirely into the PRC's existing seat.
Like what happened with Germany.
Exactly like East Germany. When Germany reunified, the East German UN seat just disappeared. The unified Germany kept the West German seat. Same logic here. The ROC vanishes and Taiwan goes from being this, de facto independent state to being legally defined as a province under the PRC. Its international presence effectively becomes zero.
So the net result is a massive loss of international standing, not a gain.
A total loss. And think about this. Countries way smaller than Taiwan, like Mongolia or even the Vatican City, are UN members. Membership isn't about size. It's about recognized sovereignty.
Which brings up another point. If the UN is this holy grail, according to the PRC's propaganda aimed at Taiwan, why does the PRC itself seem to treat the UN's authorities so, selectively?
That's the glaring double standard, isn't it? The UN isn't some world government with its own army. It's primarily a platform, a symbol. Its real power is limited, especially by the veto held by the 5 permanent Security Council members, which includes the PRC. They use it to get benefits, like the recognition in 1971, and to block things they don't like investigations or resolutions against their interests or allies. But when the UN rules against them, suddenly its authority doesn't seem so sacred.
The South China Sea case is the perfect example, right? 2016.
Textbook example. The tribunal operating under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, LANCLOS, issued a crystal-clear ruling. It said China's expansive 9-line claims had no legal basis.
A major decision under a UN framework. And China's response?
They basically said, nope, not recognizing it, not participating, not accepting it. They completely ignored the ruling and just kept building and militarizing those artificial islands.
So they treat the UN like a buffet. They take the parts they like, the 1971 seat recognition, and they just leave the parts they don't like, the 2016 ruling, on the table.
Exactly. It's a pick-and-choose approach.
Yeah.
So the question becomes, why on earth should anyone in Taiwan trust a promise about UN benefits from a state that holds the institution in such obvious contempt when it suits them?
It really undermines the whole Holy Grail idea. It suggests the UN is more of a political tool for them than a respected authority.
Which leads us to what actually matters in international law when determining statehood, beyond just symbolic UN membership. You often hear diplomats refer back to the Montevideo Convention.
Right, the Montevideo Convention from, 1933? What are the criteria there? Because that's what lawyers and diplomats actually look at, isn't it?
It is. It lays out 4 basic requirements for statehood. You need 1, a defined territory, 2, a permanent population, 3, an effective government, and 4, the capacity to enter into relations with other states.
Okay, let's run Taiwan through that checklist. Yeah. Defined territory. Check Taiwan Island, Penghu, Kinmen, Matsu. Permanent population. Check about 23 million people. Effective government. Absolutely democratically elected. Taxes, laws, services, military. It functions very effectively.
Right. So the first 3 are clearly met. The sticking point is number 4, the capacity to enter into relations with other states.
And that's where the PRC's pressure comes in, forcing countries to choose between Beijing and Taipei for formal diplomatic ties.
Exactly. It's a political constraint imposed by the PRC, not an inherent lack of capacity about Taiwan. Taiwan maintains incredibly strong de facto relationships, trade offices, cultural exchanges, security cooperation with dozens of major countries, including the U.S., Japan, and European nations. They function like embassies in all but name.
So the lack of widespread formal recognition and UN membership is a symptom of PRC pressure, not proof that Taiwan fails the fundamental tests of statehood according to international law.
Precisely. The core criteria are met. The UN seat is more about the politics of recognition than the reality of existence, which makes the propaganda pushing it as the only path to legitimacy so misleading.
Okay, so we've dismantled the core UN argument. Now let's get into some of the other specific claims they use. The cognitive warfare tactics designed to make people feel, I don't know, worse off than they are.
Right, the nitty-gritty stuff. Tactic 1, the passport problem. This one pops up a lot online. Oh, Taiwanese passports are useless. They're restricted. You need a PRC passport for real travel freedom.
Okay, let's just pull up the facts. The Henley Passport Index, or similar rankings, consistently show the Taiwanese ROC passport giving visa-free or visa-on-arrival access to, what is it now, around 168 countries?
Yeah, somewhere in that ballpark, usually ranking around 30th globally. Very strong. Now, compare that to the PRC passport.
Much lower, usually around 80-something countries, ranking somewhere in the 60s globally.
It's not even close. Taiwanese citizens have nearly double the visa-free access compared to PRC citizens. And crucially, that includes visa-free travel to huge, important economic zones like the entire Schengen area in Europe.
Which is a massive advantage for business, tourism, study, everything. PRC citizens generally need to apply for visas for Schengen.
And here's the kicker, the real irony. Who is actively lobbying countries not to grant Taiwan visa-free status? Who pressures airlines and governments to list Taiwan as a province of China?
The PRC itself.
Exactly. They actively work to restrict Taiwan's international space and travel convenience, and then they turn around and use that politically imposed isolation as proof that Taiwanese people are trapped and would be freer with a PRC passport.
It's like someone locking your door from the outside, then telling you that you can't leave your room and should just move in with them instead. It's absurdly manipulative.
Totally. Okay, tactic 2, the economic argument. This is the big one, aimed right at people's wallets. China's economy is huge. It's a powerhouse. Unification will bring Taiwan massive prosperity.
Again, sounds appealing on the surface. Bigger economy, more opportunities, right?
But you have to look beyond the total GDP number. What matters for individual people, for you listening, is your standard of living. That usually means looking at GDP per capita and average income.
And the difference there is stark. Taiwan's GDP per capita is what, around $36,000 US?
Roughly, yeah. And China's.
Closer to $13,000.
So per person, Taiwan's economy is nearly 3 times wealthier than China's. And studies consistently show average salaries in Taiwan are significantly higher, maybe 60% higher, depending on the measure. Plus, wealth tends to be distributed a bit more evenly.
So the argument that merging a $36,000 per capita transparent democratic economy into a $13,000 per capita centrally controlled, opaque one will somehow make the average Taiwanese person richer.
It just defies basic economic logic. Not to mention Taiwan's huge advantage in high tech, especially semiconductors, with TSMC leading the world that's built on its political freedom, rule of law, and integration with other free market economies. That's not something the PRC system can replicate or guarantee.
And isn't the economic dependence narrative also shifting? Taiwan's been actively diversifying trade away from China.
Absolutely. Exports to China as a percentage of Taiwan's total have been dropping. They're increasing trade with the U.S., Japan, Southeast Asia, Europe. The idea that Taiwan is inescapably bound to China economically is becoming less true every year.
Okay, so passports Taiwan wins. Economy per person Taiwan wins. What about tactic 3, the freedom and democracy argument? This one is more insidious. They try to use Taiwan's own vibrant, sometimes messy, democracy against it.
Yeah, the line is, look how chaotic Taiwan is.
Yeah.
All that arguing in parliament, those protests,
Yes.
unstable, inefficient. Wouldn't a strong, stable hand be better?
It frames democratic debate as weakness. But, democracy is supposed to be a bit noisy. It's like a big family dinner. People might disagree loudly, argue passionately.
But there's an underlying trust and mechanisms to resolve things. Elections, you have courts, you have free press, holding power accountable. It allows for correction.
Whereas authoritarianism looks quiet and orderly on the surface.
But that quiet comes at a cost.
Yeah.
You can't speak out. If you criticize the government in Taiwan, you might get yelled at online or debated fiercely. If you do it in the PRC, you risk disappearing, getting jailed, having your family threatened. It's a fundamentally different reality.
And the international rankings reflect that, don't they? The Economist Intelligence Unit's Democracy Index
consistently ranks Taiwan as a full democracy, usually the highest in Asia, with scores near 9 out of 10. China. It's consistently labeled authoritarian, scoring down around 2 out of 10.
Massive difference. And what about just basic information access?
Taiwan has one of the freest presses in the world. No great firewall blocking websites. You can access Google, Facebook, YouTube, international news, anything. In China, accessing those same basic global platforms requires using illegal VPNs. constantly playing cat and mouse with censors.
So the freedom to know, to speak, to criticize, to access information, these are huge, non-negotiable differences that would vanish instantly under unification. It's not just about politics. It affects everyday life profoundly.
Absolutely. And that brings us to some of the more advanced manipulation techniques that go beyond just twisting facts. These are aimed at shifting emotions, creating psychological pressure.
Right, getting deeper into the cognitive warfare playbook.
One key tactic is manufacturing victimhood. This is mostly aimed inside China. The narrative fed to the Chinese public is often that Taiwanese people are somehow being oppressed, either by their own elected government, painted as corrupt separatists, or by the U.S., portrayed as manipulating Taiwan.
So it paints any potential military action not as aggression, but as liberation, a rescue mission.
Exactly. It reframes invasion as a moral duty. It's incredibly cynical. Then there's the related tactic of false kinship.
The blood is thicker than water. We're all one Chinese family rhetoric.
It uses cultural and historical ties to make unification seem natural, inevitable, like a family reunion. But again, the actions contradict the words.
How can you claim to be family while aiming thousands of missiles at Taiwan? Or slapping southern punitive bans on Taiwanese agricultural products like pineapples or custard apples just to inflict economic pain?
Real families don't usually express affection through military threats and economic coercion. It's using the language of kinship as a weapon.
What else? There's the repetition thing too, right?
Oh yeah, low-cost repetition. This is classic propaganda. Take a claim, even one that's easily debunked, like the idea that Taiwan constantly suffers from power shortages.
Which isn't true. Taiwan maintains a pretty healthy reserve margin, often higher than places like Tokyo, right?
Correct. But the lie gets repeated endlessly in state media, on social media bots, through influencers. The goal isn't necessarily to convince people it's 100% true with facts. It's to repeat it so often that it just feels familiar, maybe even partially true. Where there's smoke, there's fire, people start to think.
It erodes your confidence in reality through sheer volume. It wears down your ability to constantly fact-check.
Exactly. It's exhausting.
Yeah.
And finally, a really dangerous one, fomenting internal division.
How does that work?
They amplify existing political disagreements within Taiwan. They push narratives that all politicians are corrupt, that democracy itself is inherently flawed and inefficient, that nothing ever gets done because of infighting.
Trying to make people cynical and apathetic about their own system.
Precisely. If you believe your own democratic system is broken beyond repair, that all choices are bad, you become less invested in defending it. You might become more open to the idea of an external authoritarian force stepping in to fix things and impose order. It weakens society from within.
So all these tactics work together to soften the ground, to make the idea of unification seem less threatening, maybe even necessary.
And if you want to see the actual end game, the reality of unification under the PRC's terms, you don't need to speculate. You just need to look at Hong Kong.
Hong Kong 2.0, the one country, two systems promise.
That framework, originally floated by Deng Xiaoping, was explicitly promised to Hong Kong for 50 years. Unchanged. Remember, 50 years, no change?
Yeah, clearly remember that.
Yeah.
How long did it actually last before Beijing effectively dismantled it?
About 23 years. The introduction of the national security law in 2020 basically crushed Hong Kong's promised autonomy, its judicial independence, its free press, pro-democracy figures arrested, newspapers shut down, protests silenced. The collapse was swift and brutal.
And the key turning point often seems to be the definition of one China.
Absolutely. For a long time, especially in dialogues involving the KMT in Taiwan, there was this deliberate ambiguity, the so-called 1992 consensus, which allowed for one China, each interpretation. Both sides could agree on one China, but maintain their own definition of what that China was, the ROC for Taipei, the PRC for Beijing.
But Beijing doesn't allow for that ambiguity anymore.
Not under the current leadership. They've effectively dropped the each interpretation part. Now it's just the one China principle, which means only the PRC is legitimate and the ROC is not recognized at all. So, unification under their current terms requires the complete elimination of the Republic of China as a legal and political entity.
So the trade-off isn't just about losing autonomy. It's about the complete erasure of Taiwan's current identity and its transformation into just another province.
That's the reality. Taiwan would go from being this self-governing democracy with de facto sovereignty, respected globally for its economy and technology, to being legally defined as a local administrative region, directly under Beijing's control. A massive, irreversible downgrade in status.
That's the actual price tag hidden behind the UN Holy Grail promise. loss of identity, loss of freedom, loss of international standing.
Total subordination. Zero independent voice, zero autonomy.
Okay, so given all this manipulation and the stark reality of the alternative, what can people do? How can listeners navigate this complex information landscape?
We always come back to critical thinking tools. 3 simple steps. Step 1, ask who benefits. Kubono. When you encounter a narrative about Taiwan's supposed instability or its inevitable isolation or economic doom without China, ask yourself, does this story primarily serve the strategic interests of the PRC? If yes, huge red flag. Treat it with extreme skepticism.
Good first step. What's next?
Step 2, check the hard numbers. Don't get swayed by emotional appeals or vague promises. Look at the actual data. Compare GDP per capita, compare average salaries, compare passport power for travel freedom, compare the democracy and freedom indices. On almost every single metric that measures individual well-being, freedom, and prosperity, Taiwan performs significantly better than the PRC. Let the facts guide you.
Numbers don't lie, or at least they're harder to manipulate than narratives. And the third step...
Step 3, look at Hong Kong. The future under PRC unification isn't some abstract hypothetical, it's happened. Hong Kong provides a clear, tragic blueprint what was lost. Press freedom, judicial independence, the right to protest, political autonomy. That is the documented, observable cost of unification under Beijing's terms. It's not speculation, it's recent history.
Who benefits? Check the numbers, look at Hong Kong. Pretty solid toolkit.
Our aim here isn't to be anti-anything, really, but pro-clarity. We want to provide objective analysis and the tools to see through the fog of propaganda. Understanding the difference between a symbolic platform like the UN and the real-world criteria for statehood, like those Montevideo points, is probably your best defense against manipulation.
Yeah, the UN is important. It's useful for lots of things, coordinating aid, setting standards, a place for dialogue. It's a vital part of the global toolkit. But it's not magic, and it's certainly not an all-powerful referee that guarantees status or safety.
Especially when, as we saw, its most powerful members, like China, use their seat as a selective weapon. They love the recognition it gave them in '71, but they completely blow off its rulings, like the South China Sea decision, when it doesn't suit their agenda.
So Taiwan's real strength isn't going to come from chasing a certificate from an organization that China itself selectively respects.
Exactly. Its strength lies in what it already has. A functioning, vibrant democracy, a world-leading high-tech economy, a highly educated population, and yes, that passport with 168 visa-free stamps that lets its people actually exercise their freedom and sovereignty by moving around the globe.
Okay, so let's leave our listeners with a final thought to chew on, a question to ponder as they see these narratives play out.
Go for it.
If unification, as presented by Beijing, means Taiwan must give up its independent international voice, its own military, its freedom of speech, and its democratic system, all in exchange for becoming a province under the PRC's UN seat. Which are those fundamental assets, the economic potential, the global travel freedom, the basic right to self-determination, represents the acceptable price of admission to a club whose most powerful members often ignore the rules anyway? Something to think about.
Definitely something to think about. Thanks for tuning in and exploring this with us today.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining Sip and Talk. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your audio goodness. And hey, definitely check out our buddy Mickey's YouTube channel. It's called Mickytolife. Mickytolife. He's got some really fun travel vlogs, cultural observations, latest memes, good stuff.
He does. Check him out.
We'll catch you on the next one.